Welcome to the PFP podcast. I'm Alex St John, Policy and Content Advisor for the Personal Finance Society. In this episode of the podcast, we are discussing the Economic Abuse and Life Insurance Good Practice Guide for Advisors that is set to be launched later this year. I'm joined by Carla Brown, Vice President of the PFS, Sarah Coles, Head of Personal Finance at Hargreaves Lansdown, and Dr. Matthew Connell, Director of Policy and Public Affairs at the PFS. Here is my conversation with Carla, Sarah and Matt. So hello, Carla, Sarah and Matt. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Hi.
Today, we're talking about the sensitive topic of economic abuse, which is a legally recognised form of domestic abuse. It's defined by the Surviving Economic Abuse Charity as often taking place in the context of intimate partner violence. It involves the control of a partner or ex-partner's money, finances, or things that money can buy, including things such as clothing, transport, food, and even a place to live. To start with, where do we think the sector is at the moment with regards to supporting clients in these instances?
I think there's been some huge strides forwards in the way that economic abuse has been recognised in the sector, in terms of accreditations being established, in terms of the fact that people are talking about it. But I still think there's a long way to go. We need more education. We need more education about actually what is economic abuse. We need more training and support to people who potentially may be coming in contact with victims of economic abuse, and really helping people to understand what it is, what it looks like, how you can recognise the signs, but then importantly, how you can help those people to get out of that situation and signpost ways to put them on the path to a better life.
Completely agree. I think steps have been made, but more can be done. Definitely. So, Matt, I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about why the PFS has decided to publish this piece of guidance.
Absolutely. So for quite a long time now, the PFS has been involved in these issues. I think even before the FCA started looking at them, and so it's always been a really important issue for us. And I think the reason why it is so key is that there is a tension. So often what planners are doing are helping clients to overcome things like tax liabilities and things like that. That's the bread and butter of financial planning. And in some ways, the best way to solve some financial planning issues is to give up a little bit of control. For example, on tax planning, if you give up a little bit of control to a trust, then from a tax point of view, then your liabilities might go down. But from more fundamental points of view, from people's real, genuine financial and physical and emotional well-being, sometimes those approaches can carry risks. And so I think it is really important. It's a really good example of having a holistic, balanced profession, that we understand all the things that can happen to clients. And in particular, one thing that professionals can do is just be aware of how situations and relationships can develop because of their experience and because of their sort of helicopter view of how finances work, that perhaps individual clients can't.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. If I turn to Sarah, you've, of course, spoken publicly about your own personal experience with economic abuse. From that perspective, what was your initial response to learning about this piece of guidance, and how important do you think it is for advisors to be well informed on this topic?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. I think if I go back and just give you a little bit of background as to my experiences. So I was a victim of financial abuse about a decade ago. And in my case, it was around restricting of my spending. So if I was spent money that my partner disapproved of, he would sort of use emotional abuse in order to sort of punish me for spending. And the sort of spending I'm talking about isn't sort of wild and crazy. It's things like buying clothes for my kids. It was also around work. So my partner refused to work. And so in order to pay the mortgage, I had to take on 3 jobs and work about 18 hours a day. So it was a very difficult sort of circumstances that I was in. What was interesting is when I first started talking about my experiences, the comments in anything I wrote would tend to be very negative, tend to be very much, I was making a fuss over nothing. You know, couples always have to have a certain amount of control over each other's finances, that sort of thing. But as time's gone on and I've talked about it more, the reaction has really changed. So people are really starting to understand where the sort of difference that comes in between that sort of normal everyday couple experiences with one another, and then when it turns to be something much more toxic and much more dangerous. I think when you sort of talk initially about economic abuse, the first things that will spring to people's minds are things like, you know, having joint accounts where one of you might go out and spend all the money or run up debts in someone's name. It doesn't tend to immediately apply. You know, people don't straight away think about things like insurance. But it's worth knowing that the real crux of financial abuse is around control. And so therefore, anything that can be used to control your partner then becomes a tool that an abuser can use. So for example, with insurance, you know, one of the things, if you're looking at something like life insurance, it actually can be used as a threat to kill. So it is an incredibly serious issue for kind of advisors to get their head around. So it's really, really positive to see there's guidance now around sort of how to deal with these sorts of issues.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for sharing your personal experience. It really does highlight how this can happen to anyone. And I think sharing experience brings this issue to life. So it sort of brings me on to my next question. The guidance will cover a little bit about signs of economic abuse. But I'd like to know from you guys, what are some of the signs of economic abuse that advisors can look out for when working with clients?
I think as a financial advisor, I think some of the key things to look for, first of all, are, you know, I suppose physical signs. So do both partners attend meetings? Is somebody talking for somebody else? Is somebody deferring control to the other partner during the meeting? Are they afraid to ask questions? Are they afraid to make comment? But also it's more practical things such as, you know, do the signatures on things match? You know, has the person actually signed the document that you think they signed? Are there any sudden changes? Do they actually have their own bank cards? Are they allowed to hold money? Do they have money in the purse? It could be things such as, you know, unexplained transfers of money to different places. It could be unpaid bills if somebody's running up debt. It could be, you know, are they not spending on what you would expect them to spend? You know, most financial planners will do budget planning with clients. So, you know, are they spending, for example, on a clothes bill, what you'd expect them to spend? Are they going out? Are they socializing? Is the social budget what you'd expect to see? And really sort of trying to open up the dialogue and ask the right questions and looking for signs of discomfort. I think that's probably a key indicator. Is quite often somebody in that situation may not know they're in that situation, or they may feel a sense of embarrassment. So it's being able to question sensitively, but not being afraid to question.
Yes, I would add to that some of the signs actually can be incredibly subtle. So sometimes it's about language. So if I think about one of the key conversations I had that made me realize I was a victim of abuse was that I told a friend I wasn't allowed to buy new clothes. And it was the phrase allowed to buy which alerted her that something was going on. So we asked a few more questions. And it can be something as subtle as that. Or it can be that, you know, people seem to be a little bit in the dark about their finances, you know, when a partner has really taken control from them. So I think definitely sort of probing a little bit further. I mean, it is always difficult when you sort of put someone on the spot because, you know, their emotional situation can be quite fragile. So it's rather than sort of drilling down into it, it's open questions. It's encouraging people to talk about it and knowing that even if in that specific moment they don't feel able to talk to you about it, they may go away and have a think about everything you've said to them and then come back and say, actually, I need to tell you a little bit more about my circumstances. So, you know, really just encouraging that open conversation is really important.
I think that's a really good point, actually, Sarah. I think, you know, many of the cases that I've dealt with where we've established that there has been economic abuse taking place or financial abuse taking place, they haven't necessarily realised it at the time, but then they have gone away and thought about it. And as you say, come back and said, you know, look, I think something's not right, or is this normal, or should this be happening? So I think giving people time to reflect on the questions you've asked is really important.
That's really helpful. Thanks very much, both. So, Carla, I'm aware that you've had first-hand experience of working with someone affected by economic abuse. Please could you tell us a bit about that experience?
Absolutely. And this is kind of the reason that I've made it a bit of a passion topic of mine. My best friend was a victim of financial abuse for many years. And sadly, she passed away last year. But it was ongoing. And as Sarah alluded to, it was a form of control. He tried to control her in many ways, but using the finances was just one way to do it. And it actually echoes a number of the things that Sarah said in terms of, he wouldn't allow her to spend money on things. He wouldn't go out to work. He was self-employed and she held down 2 jobs. He would spend money on frivolous items, whereas she'd be scrapping together coins to buy the children the school shoes. He wouldn't contribute towards things. And ultimately, she wasn't allowed to go out, for example. And I think where my frustration arose was that I didn't see it at the time. And it was only because she was too embarrassed, she hid it. So she hid that all this was going on. And it was only kind of later on, as the relationship started to break down for many, many reasons, this has been one of them, that she actually opened up and told me about it. And I was so cross with myself that I hadn't spotted the signs, that I thought, I need to do something about this. I need to educate myself better so I can help more people like her realize what's going on, or help advisors help people realize what's going on and how to actually signpost ways to get help. So it became really important to me, which is why I've gone on and done further training and become a financial abuse specialist, etc., because it's something that needs talking about and needs highlighting. It's so important.
Thanks for sharing that, Carla. I'm really sorry to hear about your friends. And I think it's just so good to hear that some good work has come out of it, with all your training and expertise following off the back of that. So thank you. So messaging around the development of soft skills is pertinent within the guidance. Why is that so important when working with someone who may be affected?
So one of the things I would say is you will be surprised at the lengths that an abuser will go to in order to control their partners. And therefore, you might underestimate the amount of damage it can do to someone, particularly to their confidence and to their self-esteem. And in some cases, they may actually be very afraid. So their resolve to kind of deal with this and to tackle it and to talk about it can be really fragile. So having the right approach to someone who's sort of coming to you and telling you about their finances and if there's an issue, it's really important. It's finding that way of getting them to open up without feeling that they're under pressure. And empathy is absolutely vital with this. And, I do think because it's so hard to see from the outside, as Carla said, it's just sometimes really hard to spot. I think it can be really difficult to understand how it happens. So I think if someone's struggling with empathy, struggling to understand how anyone could be a victim of it, it's really important just to be totally honest with yourself and think, right, I need to educate myself. I need to go out and, read up on experiences of people like me and sort of get to grips with it. So it's worth me saying that as a financial expert, being a victim is something that surprises people. So when I first started talking about it, there was some shock. Some people said, oh, you're very brave talking about this. Whereas, I don't see there's any bravery in it at all, because I don't see there's anything to be embarrassed about. There's no shame. You are a perfectly normal person behaving completely normally in a relationship. You trust your partner, you're trying to make them happy, you're keen to do whatever it is for the best, and they're manipulating the situation. So you're constantly trying to battle for normality. And so really, victim survivors, they're just like everyone else. They've just been the victim of an abuser. And once you get your head around that idea and see how because the abuse tends to grow quite slowly. So it'll start with a little bit of like, oh, I wouldn't necessarily spend that money. And then it will grow into something much more kind of controlling and really the sorts of abuse that comes as a shock to people. So I think once you sort of get to grips with how this works and, the fact that there's nothing unusual about people who are victims, it's just the person they've come into contact with, I think it can be much, much easier to sort of empathize with the person and understand where they're coming from and therefore how you can best help them.
Thanks, Sarah. Matt, did you want to come in, Matt?
Yeah, and I guess everything that Sarah's just said sort of underlines a lot of the direction that the profession's been moving in over the last decade or so. So, probably about 20, 30 years ago, we thought of professionalism very much in terms of sort of technical knowledge and applying complex technical knowledge to detailed situations. But where we've moved, things like the Personal Finance Society developing its professional map has been much more around communication skills, around skills like empathy and understanding different people's lives, different types of relationships. But often we talk about those things. We talk about sort of developing soft skills, developing empathy, developing relationships with clients, and it all feels rather abstract. But I think this is a fantastic example of how that kind of big movement in financial planning, how there really are really important, concrete and particular examples for it.
Definitely. Thanks, Matt. So when the PFS started talking to partners on the issue, it was told that advisors should be aware of the risks when setting up trusts for life insurance. Carla, what exactly was the worry here?
I think, as we've already mentioned today, one of the main drivers for financial abuse is control. And obviously, quite often the reason people put trusts in place is to gain control or to keep control. And so you've got to be really careful when you are creating trusts that you have the right people in the right roles, because you are handing over control of your assets to the trust or to the trustees. And that decision is quite often irreversible once it's done. So it's really important that advisors are having these conversations with clients. It would be a way of an abuser retaining control over somebody's finances for a very long time, and the victim would have absolutely no say over this. So, I mean, the easiest way to try and prevent this from happening is to make sure you've got more than one trustee on any kind of trust, and that will hopefully reduce the risk of somebody having ultimate control, or perhaps the right other trustee would identify it. But this is a key risk area that people need to be aware of when they are looking at life insurance and trusts.
But just add to that, kind of from what Sarah said, is often financial abuse is something that grows quite gradually. So this is an area where, again, I think as Carla says, that kind of good practice around having more than one trustee, that's something that an advisor can skillfully prompt people to do, even if they don't feel like there's any prospect of them being in an abusive relationship. Just explaining to clients that this is a normal thing to do. It's good practice. It's what all sensible people do. Even if you never need to rely on the fact that there's more than one trustee. It's just a perfectly normal, sensible thing to do when people are making financial plans, and then that way you can prevent issues from getting so bad before you get you're even aware that any kind of financial abuse might take place.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Matt. So with life insurance, advisors can be limited to picking ready-made policies set by providers. Sometimes joint life insurance policies can be impossible to separate, which can risk opening up one party to coercion or control. Can advisors work with providers to create better contracts?
Definitely. And I think this is where it's really important that advisors do understand exactly what the contracts do and don't cover and what options are available. Just to give you an example of a case, I had a client who had been in an abusive relationship, got divorced. The policy wasn't actually dealt with as part of the divorce, so she carried on paying it. It was a life insurance policy with critical illness. She then developed a critical illness, tried to claim on the policy, and the life insurance company insisted on contacting the ex-husband to see if he would allow the benefits to be paid out. So he withheld benefits. So it's really important that advisors do understand, as I say, all facets of the contract. Are there options in there to allow separation? What happens to that policy if partners go their separate ways? But I think it's also really important that when you've got clients who are perhaps going through a separation and divorce, that advisors make sure that the policies are dealt with as part of that process and not just left to kind of fester in the background. And it's something perhaps that solicitors need to be more aware of as well. And as a financial advisors, we tend to get quite involved in the financial arrangements with clients. So, perhaps it's something that advisors can raise with the solicitors as well. But it's important to have those conversations and make sure you know exactly what you're getting your client into and out of at the relevant times.
Definitely. I think that's really good advice. Thanks, Carla. So what would you each say is your one key takeaway from the guidance that you would pass on to our listeners?
So I'd definitely say that, one of the real positives from the guidance is the fact that it's raising the issue. And if there's the one thing people take away, it's just understanding that this is something else that they need to consider and sort of factor into how they do business and how they look at products. So it might not be something that you talk about very often in everyday life because people don't tend to talk about it. So you don't realize how widespread it is. So I think having the guidance there is just a really good reminder that this is part of life for an awful lot of people, and it definitely needs to be considered.
Definitely, and I would endorse what Sarah's saying there. I think my key takeaway is around what we can do to help. So it is about asking the right questions. It's about being aware. It's about not being afraid to have those conversations. It's about raising awareness. It is about talking about it. It's about it not being a taboo. And it's about us as advisors in the position that we're in, being confident to have those conversations and being able to signpost people to help if it's needed.
And yeah, I think from me going on from that, it just underlines the importance of professionalism and professional advice. It's so easy to think of financial services and advice as always sort of trying to take the shortest route or the cheapest route or the most convenient route. But actually, this is a demonstration of just how much social good advisors can give, and the fact that financial advisors are some of the few people that are still involved in people's lives and talking about their relationships in a meaningful way. So it really underlines just the sheer importance of professionalism and the importance of professionals to be aware of this.
Completely agree. Looking forwards, what further work could be done across the sector in support of those affected by economic abuse and the work done by charities such as the Surviving Economic Abuse charity?
So I would say when you're talking about the sort of the difficulties involved in getting out of this sort of situation, it's really important to tell people that, not to put them off by just how difficult separation can be. Because although it is really hard and it takes a long time to go through the process, it's worth it. Because every day you're in an abusive relationship, things get worse. Whereas every day you're out, there's the opportunity for things to get better. So I think it is really important to kind of inject some positivity into the discussion that, there are lots of things left to be done. Separating is still really difficult, but it is still worth it. And I think, the industry as a whole can look at, things like the small print about separation and looking at products through the lens of economic abuse and considering the potential risks. I mean, if you look at, for example, some of the recent work that Surviving Economic Abuse has done on mortgages, there's a lot of questions around, how you turn a joint mortgage into somebody, dealing with it as a sort of a single person's mortgage, when actually at the moment that requires an awful lot of cooperation from both people. So you can end up in a situation where somebody's living in a house, paying their share of the mortgage, and yet faces the threat of being evicted because of the behaviour of their ex-partner. So there's still lots to kind of work through in terms of making sure that the industry's got the right products and got the right small print in place. But definitely, I would say, nobody should be put off by how hard this is, because it's so hard to live with abuse that getting out of it, although it's difficult, it does at least have an end point at the very end of it.
I think there's some really good points there. I think in terms of what we can do differently, I mean, I've taken an accreditation, so I'm a financial abuse specialist, as I mentioned before, through Standards International. So it's looking at training courses that are out there that can help broaden advisors' knowledge and experience in dealing with this type of situation. As part of the accreditation as a business, we put in place a survival kit, which we can give to victims of financial abuse. We've put together a toolkit which signposts people to relevant places. We've put together our own in-house training procedure for new members of staff, so they're aware of what possible signs of financial abuse might be. So I think it's about having this general awareness within our profession that actually this is out there, it's happening to people. You might not know about it, you might not see it straight away, but it is happening, and we need to be able to help people get out of those situations, because as Sarah said, people can feel it's difficult to get out of, but it's possible and life will be better afterwards.
And I think as Carla and Sarah both said, this is an area where it's not it's not, people don't have to operate in the dark or work alone. There's a growing body of knowledge, and the SEA report's part of it. The accreditations are part of it. There's a growing body of knowledge and understanding of behaviours and skills. So the full gamut of education and ways of analysing this as a learnable and practicable skill that didn't exist just a few years ago. So again, it's, I think one big thing to take away is that organisations like SEA and others are there developing this knowledge and information all the time for professionals to access.
That's great. So thank you all for joining me on the podcast today. I think it's been a really good discussion and opportunity to learn more about the subjects.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
If anyone listening requires any further support in relation to this matter, please visit survivingeconomicabuse.org. Thank you for listening to this episode of the PFP podcast. For more podcasts and useful links, please visit pfp.thepfs.org/podcasts. Until next time, goodbye.